London is a city built in layers. Beneath its markets lie plague pits filled in haste. Beneath its grand avenues sit fields where the condemned once took their final steps. Beneath counting houses and coffee shops, long-forgotten graves press into the clay. And in the 1860s, engineers began driving railway tunnels straight through it all. London was expanding faster than its streets could cope. Traffic choked the roads with goods and commuters crowding the city's arteries. Something had to change, and the answer was radical. A railway beneath the capital itself. When the Metropolitan Railway opened in 1863, it was hailed as a triumph of Victorian engineering, with gaslit platforms, steam-filled tunnels, and carriages hauled through the darkness by iron locomotives. But the underground was not carved through empty earth. It cut through burial grounds, execution sites, and foundations laid centuries before. Today, more than 5 million passengers use the tube each day. They swipe their cards, stand on escalators and wait beneath fluorescent light for the next train to arrive. Few pause to consider what lies beyond the tiled walls. Fewer still think about what might linger in the spaces between stations, or beneath them. Tonight, we are not travelling across open countryside. We are descending. Down through wartime fear. Down through murder. Down through disaster, burial, and execution. From Farringdon to Marble Arch and Bank, from Covent Garden to Bethnal Green, we will follow the underground not as a map of lines, but as a map of memory. So, stand clear of the closing doors and step with me beneath the streets of London to meet the ghosts of the underground. In January 1863, the world's first underground railway opened between Paddington and Farringdon. It was an astonishing feat of Victorian engineering, but its construction came at a cost. Thousands of navvies, labourers whose names rarely appear in official records, excavated the first tunnels using the cut and cover method. Roads were torn open, trenches dug deep, and whole sections of the city disrupted for months at a time. The work was relentless and it was dangerous. In May 1860, an excursion train on the main line overran its platform and crashed into the Metropolitan Railway's exposed works. Later that year, a boiler explosion killed driver George Wiggins and stoker George Tan. Earthworks collapsed along Euston Road, bringing down pavements, gardens and telegraph wires. On one occasion, the Fleet sewer burst into the excavations, flooding the works with foul water. The early underground was not a single system, but a patchwork of competing private companies, each driving its own tunnels and laying its own tracks. As engineering techniques improved, deeper lines were bored through the London clay and, by the turn of the 20th century, electric traction replaced steam. In 1933, the separate networks were finally brought together under unified control. By then, the railway beneath London had already become vast. And yet, for all the risk and disruption of its construction, the underground was not the first thing to claim lives here. Long before steam filled the tunnels, before navvies cut through clay, before the word underground appeared on a station wall, this city had already marked certain places for death. Our journey begins at Farringdon, one of the original stations of the Metropolitan Railway. Just beyond the platforms lies Smithfield, known today for its market, but for centuries associated with punishment and execution. In 1305, William Wallace was put to death here. During the reign of Mary I, Protestant men and women were burned at the stake here for their faith. So, when engineers cut the first underground line through this district, they were not digging through neutral ground. They were laying iron rails on soil long connected to judgment and fire. But execution was only one part of Smithfield's story. Some deaths here didn't draw crowds. They passed with little notice, confined to court records and parish registers. In 1758, a 13-year-old apprentice milliner named Anne Naylor was abused and murdered by her employer Sarah Metyard. Anne's mutilated body was thrown into a gully in the area where the station now stands. In the years after the underground opened, railway workers spoke of unexplained cries echoing in the tunnels after hours. The sound, some say, of a young girl crying out. Others describe a sudden chill in empty passageways or the sense of someone just out of sight. Gradually, staff began to associate these disturbances with Anne Naylor, the so-called screaming spectre of Farringdon. Whether born of suggestion, coincidence, or something less easily explained, Anne's story endures. A reminder that the first line of London's underground was laid in a district where spectacle and private tragedy once stood side by side. If we travel west now to Marble Arch, we arrive at what was once Tyburn, after Smithfield, the city's principal place of execution. Here stood the great wooden gallows known as the Tyburn Tree, where tens of thousands are believed to have died, hanged before spectators who treated death as entertainment. Today's Central Line runs directly beneath that ground. Passengers wait on the platform, not always aware that they stand under what was once a field of public death. And whilst cries and sometimes even the sounds of a jeering crowd have been reported here, the most persistent Marble Arch apparition may relate to a more recent tragedy. A few days after the start of the Blitz in September 1940, a bomb plunged into this station, killing at least 20 people. Since then, a male figure in a long overcoat and trilby hat has been seen riding silently up the escalator, vanishing before he reaches the top. An uncomfortable reminder of loss beneath the city, forever rising, but never reaching daylight. From the unhappy layers beneath Farringdon and Marble Arch, let's travel east, back into the city. Bank Underground Station is today one of the largest subterranean stations in the world. It opened in the 1890s, after the City and South London Railway were granted the right to extend their line northwards towards Angel. At the same time, they were told they could demolish the Church of St Mary Woolnoth, building a station on the site. Public objection followed, and in 1896, Parliament imposed a condition: the church itself must remain standing. The company could not demolish the building, but they were allowed to use the subsoil beneath. The vaults at St Mary Woolnoth had held burials for centuries. According to an interview with the Conservative MP for East Finsbury in March 1896, when work began, the coffins within those vaults had begun to rupture and explode. During their removal, piles of human bones were found beneath the foundations, with some estimating that this had been a burial place for over 1,000 years. The bones were eventually reinterred at the City of London Cemetery, and the church remained balanced on massive iron girders, while beneath it, the railway booking hall was constructed in the old crypt. Today, commuters pass through this place of burial without ever realising it. The entrance that once led down to the vault now leads passengers onto the Northern Line. So would it be surprising to learn that some say the dead have not entirely vacated the premises? If one spectre is most often associated with Bank, it is the woman in black, Sarah Whitehead. Her story, if the legend is to be believed, begins above ground. In 1811, Philip Whitehead, a former employee of the Bank of England, was tried at the Old Bailey for forgery, a capital offence. He was convicted and sentenced to death. After his execution, his sister, Sarah Whitehead, began visiting the Bank of England daily. Dressed entirely in black, her face veiled, she would stand outside asking staff if they had seen her brother. The clerks, unsettled by her appearance, nicknamed her the Bank Nun. And it seems that not even death has stopped her searching. Passengers and staff have reported seeing a veiled woman in black moving along the platforms or across the ticket hall. Some claim she glides soundlessly past the barriers. Others say she appears briefly beneath the harsh electric lighting before dissolving into shadow. On rare occasions, witnesses have heard a soft voice asking a single question: "Have you seen my brother?" If grief can imprint itself upon a place, and perhaps Sarah Whitehead has never truly left. And grief did not end there. In January 1941, during the Blitz, a bomb exploded in the escalator machinery room at Bank, killing 56 people. Decades later, in 1982, as the station was closing for the night, a worker crossing the ticket hall heard a sudden, violent banging from inside a lift. He had not only checked it as being empty moments before, but he had also shut it down, so it was impossible for anyone to be inside. Was this Sarah? A victim of war? Or something even older? In a station built inside a grave, perhaps it is no surprise that not every presence seems eager to leave. From Bank, we travel west again to Theatreland and the Piccadilly line's busy but haunted Covent Garden station. William Terriss was an actor admired for his melodramatic roles. Born William Charles James Lewin, by the 1890s he was a familiar and fashionable figure in the West End. His colleague, Richard Archer Prince, sometimes unkindly nicknamed Mad Archer, had once shared the same theatrical ambitions. But his career faltered, and as his circumstances worsened, his behaviour grew increasingly erratic. In late 1897, after learning that his financial support from the Actors' Benevolent Fund would no longer continue, Prince became convinced that Terriss had influenced the decision. On the evening of the 16th of December, Prince waited outside the stage door of the Adelphi Theatre. Terriss was due to perform that night, and as he approached the entrance, Prince stepped forward from the shadows and attacked him with a knife. Terriss was stabbed 3 times before collapsing in the street. He died shortly afterwards. Prince did not flee. He was arrested at the scene and, admitting what he had done, said that Terriss had wronged him. He was later declared insane and confined to Broadmoor. A plaque now marks the spot by the Adelphi stage door where Terriss fell. A quiet memorial in a street still busy with theatregoers. Yet the story does not end there. In the decades that followed, staff at Covent Garden Underground Station began reporting unexplained disturbances after closing time. Footsteps on empty platforms, knocking from within empty lifts, and the sound of a man sighing as though catching his breath. In 1955, a ticket collector locking the station late one November night reported seeing a tall, well-dressed man ascending the emergency staircase. His face, he said, appeared drawn and sorrowful. Assuming a passenger had been trapped inside, he called out and moved to open the gate. But by the time he reached it, the figure had vanished. The same employee claimed to see the man again days later. A colleague independently described a similar encounter with a tall stranger whose presence felt oppressive as though the air itself had grown heavy. Gradually, the figure was identified in staff lore as William Terriss, the actor who had died above ground, just streets away. Further accounts surfaced over the years, including from a lift operator in the early 1970s who described an encounter almost identical to those before it. He described seeing a tall geezer dressed in old-fashioned clothes who vanished without a trace. When he was shown a photo of Terriss, he identified him as the ghost. And then, as quietly as they had begun, the sightings ceased. Covent Garden station didn't, however, open until April 1907, some 10 years after the murder of William Terriss. He can't have used the station, so why should his ghost haunt it? Well, one theory is that Terriss had a very fixed daily schedule, which included visiting a bakery that stood on the site of the new station. Terriss died, the bakery was demolished, but something of this tall, fashionable actor seems to have slipped across the years, becoming one of London's most famous underground hauntings. We now head eastward to our last stop on this journey, Bethnal Green station. Here we'll find a different sorrow in the tragedy of lives lost in numbers and grief pressed into the fabric of the place by catastrophe. In the 1930s, as London continued to expand, the Central Line grew under the New Works programme, its tunnels driven toward new suburbs rising beyond the city. At Bethnal Green, the platforms were complete when war broke out in 1939, though no trains had yet run. When the Blitz began, the unfinished station was, like so many others, requisitioned as an air raid shelter, with space for thousands of people. On the evening of the 3rd of March 1943, an air raid siren sounded across the East End. Reports of bombing in Berlin had raised fears of retaliation, so families made their way toward the shelter at Bethnal Green. It was dark, and the stairway was unlit, with no central handrail. Rain had made the surfaces underfoot slippery. Near the base of the steps, a woman stumbled while holding a child. Within seconds, the narrow entrance became impassable, with bodies pressed together in darkness, unable to move forward or back. 173 people died there. Most were women and children. No bomb had struck the station or even fallen nearby. This was a tragedy which unfolded entirely within the shelter itself. News of what happened was restricted, and the full circumstances were not made public until after the war had ended. Official reports and legal cases debated whether panic had taken hold, whether a nearby weapons test had contributed to the confusion, and whether the design of the stairway had worsened the crush. Though, of course, for the families who lost someone that night, the distinctions scarcely mattered. For years, a small plaque above one of the subway entrances marked this tragedy, but it was easily missed in the rhythm of daily commuting. I passed through this station countless times when I lived nearby, unaware of how close I stood to that history. Only recently did I return to study the plaque. I found that in 2017, the Stairway to Heaven Trust erected a more visible memorial in the garden beside the station. Here, the names of the dead are listed on an inverted staircase. In the decades after the disaster, some staff spoke of sounds heard late at night, describing faint crying or voices rising and falling in empty tunnels. In 1981, a foreman working after hours heard what he believed to be children sobbing, the sound gradually joined by the cries of women, lingering for several minutes before fading away. Whatever we mean when we call a place haunted, Bethnal Green is marked by what happened here. On that March evening in 1943, time stopped for 173 people. And when the trains have gone and the station falls quiet, the weight of that tragedy still lingers. The Underground was built to move London forward, to carry clerks and labourers, actors and bankers, shoppers and soldiers from one day to the next with speed and efficiency. It was an answer to overcrowded streets and industrial ambition, but in digging downward, the city did not leave its past behind. It built through it. Through execution fields, through church crypts and forgotten vaults, through places where grief took root long before the first train ever ran. At Farringdon, the ground remembers punishment. At Marble Arch, it remembers spectacle. At Bank, it remembers burial and a sister's unending search. At Covent Garden, it remembers a life cut short in lamplight. And at Bethnal Green, it remembers the weight of fear on a darkened staircase. Some of the stories we have followed here are well documented. Others belong to railway folklore, passed between night staff and signal boxes in the early hours. None can be proven beyond doubt, but that is not the point. Cities, like people, carry memory in layers. And when the last service has run and the tunnels fall quiet, there is a different kind of stillness beneath London. The Underground is not haunted because it is dark. It is haunted because it remembers. So the next time you stand on a platform and feel a sudden chill in the air or hear footsteps you cannot quite place, pause for a moment before you dismiss it. You are not just beneath a city. You are beneath centuries